Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, but we are still waiting for one trustee, I believe, and we require that to meet a quorum for this evening's meeting. So we will give us a few more minutes to get full attendance, and then we can get this extra meeting of the Board of Trustees started. And I was on mute again. All right, let me start over. I believe we have the 6 members of the Board of Trustees that we are expecting this evening, so welcome, and a fairly full room of members from the public. So thank you all for joining us on this extra meeting. So I will officially call to order this meeting of the Board of Trustees at 7:02 p.m. on Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. Miranda, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Larson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover.
Here.
Trustee Taylor.
Here.
Trustee Danforth. Trustee Danforth, I think you have to press *6.
Okay, I think, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yep. Trustee Coombs
okay,
Ismail.
I'm here.
You're here. Trustee Coombs Ismail. Can you hear us, Trustee Coombs Ismail? We can't hear. Okay, Trustee Corvalin.
Yeah, I'm here.
Trustee Coombs Ismail, I think we can hear you now.
You can hear me now?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great.
And please note for the record that Trustee Abt is absent.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, this is a special meeting of the Board of Trustees that we determined was necessary after our executive session last week after the main meeting. And due to questions regarding parking restrictions or parking requirements in the Central Business District. But for the full details, I am going to just hand this over straight to our town attorney, who along with town staff has spent the last week doing a lot of research and trying to figure out where things stand. So Jennifer Madsen, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Trustees. I'd like to explain a little bit of why we're here tonight, outline Ordinance 641 for you, and then provide your options for consideration of that draft ordinance. So let me start with why we're here tonight. For some background and to provide some context, Article 8 of Chapter 16 of Netherlands Zoning Code sets out regulations related to off-street parking. These regulations in Article 8 apply when a property owner enlarges or changes the use of a structure or submits a request for a building permit for a new structure. One element of these regulations is a requirement for the property owner to provide off-street parking for each type of use. Off-street parking is defined as any parking in an area outside of the right-of-way. These off-street parking requirements are set forth in the Nederland Municipal Code in section 16-202. This section 16-202 was implemented by the adoption of Ordinance 645, which was passed in January of 2008. So the reason why we're here tonight is that about 2 weeks ago, it was discovered that there was a conflict between section 16-202 in the adopting ordinance number 645, and then in section 16-202 in the online code version. The language of those two sections, which are the same, the language was different. And the specifics of the language in the ordinance 645 and then the online version are set forth in the AIM that was submitted tonight. But let me just briefly explain the difference. The difference between the two pertains to the parking requirements in the central business district. Essentially, the online version of the code requires the property owner in the CBD to provide off-street parking as specified in the table or by payment to the commercial parking fund. And just to explain, the online version of the code is prepared by MuniCode. It's the codified version of the municipal code. And the ordinance 645, the difference there is that it states that no off-street parking is required in the CBD except as may be required through the special use review approval process. So when this meeting was set, the issue was the uncertainty as to what is the law in Nederland related to 16-202. We have a pending special review use application and potentially other applications that may be presented to the town. So one purpose of this ordinance that's presented to you tonight, this emergency moratorium, is to investigate the law related to section 16-202. And it's important that the town know the requirements of section 16-202 so that there's a clean record on the decision of these applications. Should an applicant or anyone else bring litigation against the town related to a special review use application that involved consideration of off-street parking requirements, we would need to show the judge what the law is in Nederland, and any uncertainty as to the law could potentially subject the town to legal challenge. And then if the challengers were successful in the litigation, the application would likely be back before the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees. So the purpose then of putting the moratorium in place is the investigation, not to waste time and money for the town for rehearing an application or for litigation. So since this meeting was called, since last Tuesday night, new information has been learned related to the adoption of Ordinance 645. And that new information is that Ordinance 645 was published in the Mountain Ear, the newspaper. It was published on January 28th, 2008. And the language in the Mountain Ear public notice for 16-202 matches what is stated online. And that is that in the CBD, applicants shall meet their off-street parking requirement by either providing parking behind or under the building or by making a payment into the commercial parking fund for each non-provided space. And this new information that we discovered is really very important to clearing up some of the uncertainty related to the law as to what 16202 is. And the reason that it's important is that in Colorado, in order to adopt an ordinance, it needs to be published in the newspaper. And then after it's published, 30 days after it's published, it becomes effective. And essentially the reason for the publication is to provide notice to the public that the town has adopted a new law and that the public is required to follow this new law. So like I said, knowing that the same language was published in the Mountaineer as what is currently online in the Muni Code really decreases uncertainty as to what the law is related to the off-street parking. Now there still is the discrepancy related to Ordinance 645. However, the case law on this is that the courts have said that the language of the ordinance that has been published is what is in effect in the municipality. So let me just stop there related to the background and what we know on 16202. And I want to just outline what Ordinance 816 does so that you know if you adopt the ordinance as is, this is what you're adopting. So if you adopt it without amendments, it would stop the processing of applications for special review uses for properties in all zone districts. So it's CBD and any other zone district within the town. And it tells town staff that it cannot accept applications for special review uses in all of these zone districts. Because the requirements of 16202 must be followed when a property owner submits a request for a building permit for a new structure, it also stops processing of applications for building permits for new structures for properties in all zone districts and tells town staff not to accept any applications for building permits for new structures in zone districts. Also, if passed as is, it would be passed as an emergency. The moratorium would go into effect immediately. To be passed as an emergency ordinance, it would need 6 votes. So all of you present tonight would need to vote in favor. And the purpose of the moratorium is essentially to allow more time to investigate the discrepancy between what is online for 16202 and then the ordinance for 645 that adopted section 16202, and then also to allow the Board of Trustees time to consider what parking requirements should be in place. So before I turn the floor back over to the mayor, I'd like you to be aware of what your options are tonight related to the adoption of this ordinance. The first thing is you can do nothing. You can decide not to adopt the moratorium ordinance. And this decision may be based on the fact that any confusion related to the law of section 16202, these off-street parking requirements, has generally been cleared up and the town can move forward in processing applications based on the language in the online Unicode. And that if you as a governing body want to make changes to the off-street parking requirements, you can make those changes just as a matter of course, as you would any other regulation within the town. The next option would be is that you can amend the ordinance so that the moratorium only applies to new applications, not to existing applications. Under this scenario, you may feel that there's a problem that needs to be addressed quickly, but that you don't need to stop any pending applications. Another option would be to amend the specifics of the ordinance. So change it so that it only applies to the CBD, change it so that it applies to only special review uses, you can make those types of amendments. And lastly, you could adopt the ordinance as it's drafted, an emergency moratorium applied to all pending and new applications for special review use permits and for building permits. So that's the end of my introduction and presentation to you, and I'm open and available for questions.
Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say thank you, Jennifer, for all the work putting in trying to clear up this, admittedly, what was last week a confusing situation. So I do open this up to the floor and for trustee questions for you before we go to public comment. And I think I will begin with Trustee Taylor.
Yes, I barged in there, sorry. Jennifer, we're considering the possibility of a moratorium here. And if help me clarify for myself, what we're addressing here is that the online municipal code and the publication in the Mountaineer disagree with the paper copy that was signed by the mayor back in 2008, I think, 2008?
Yes.
It's that discrepancy we're worried about. Would there be a way, instead of doing a moratorium, simply correcting that paper copy and re-implementing it and then saying, there, we're done. Everyone understands this is the code?
Absolutely, that would go in line with the first option that I provided to you, and that's to do nothing, essentially. So do not adopt the ordinance. And what we would do to fix the paper copy, I mean, I think it's hard to know exactly what happened in January of 2008.
We were just discovering marijuana back then. God knows what happened.
Right, who knows, but the paper copy is different. And so what we could do is if you decided as a board not to move forward with the ordinance that's presented to you, you could, what I would suggest is I would bring back a resolution and a corrected ordinance, and the resolution would essentially say, Mayor Larson, we give you the authority to sign this so that we can clear up our books related to Ordinance 645.
The corrected paper copy.
Yes.
So let me just note my one concern about the other options where we're considering a review of the law regarding parking. My one concern about that is we're trying to do a whole bunch of things at once. I think we would be better off to stabilize the law as it is, and that seems fairly straightforward based upon this discussion. And then later, if we want to discuss changes to that law, that would be fine. But my concern is we might be tripping over our own feet if we're going to be looking at the law and not just codifying it and saying we're fixing this one problem, but instead, oh, maybe we can fix other problems too. So my feeling right now is that we're best off to just put a nail in the current code, make sure that's consistent, and then move from there. So that, I have to say, I remain confused. This is a very messy problem, and I look forward to hearing the comments of my other trustee peers.
Thank you, Julian. Speaking of other trustee peers, how about Trustee Danforth?
Yes, thank you. I think to me it sounds pretty clear with the information that Jennifer Madsen found, the fact that it was published in the Mountaineer with the same language that's written online, and that the law states that what is published to the public is what is law. So I don't see a need to do a moratorium. I just see a need to kind of clear up the documentation of this ordinance and making sure that what we have signed, the signed paper copy, just matches what was published and what is online. So to me, it sounds like that's really the only issue here. If we decide to go down the path of reviewing parking requirements in the CBD and desire to have any changes, I think that's a lengthy process that we can, tackle down the road if we decide that that's what we want to do. But I absolutely don't think that it's necessary to have a moratorium or to have any kind of emergency actions to try to change the parking or review the parking. I think we've been operating since 2008 with that code, and that's the code that's published. And I think we do nothing with the moratorium and keep the status quo.
Thank you, Lindsay. Trustee Corvallin.
Oh, yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm messing around with this app. Okay, I agree with everybody that we don't need to do anything, but I feel like I disagree in the sense that I think the current parking code is totally dysfunctional and has been dealt with differently for every applicant, and there's no consistency, and it's a true mess. And I would like to see us bring up parking code, like we talked about earlier, ASAP, to revisit it. Not so much because of this, but just because it's a bad code and because town doesn't know how to enforce it. And it's a problem, and a lot of complaints we receive are because of the parking code. So while with this situation, I think we're better off either doing nothing or doing choice B, which is to start the moratorium today so that applicants previous can still do their thing. But I wonder if there's any other trustee that also is not happy with the current parking code and would seize this opportunity to change it. Yeah, I was kind of excited about that opportunity. Like, hey, now we can actually all change this code that is so bad, in my opinion. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Tanya.
So are there any other trustees that also feel like they don't like the current parking code? That doesn't make sense?
I mean, I think that's something we can review. We can send it to the planning commission to start with.
Yeah.
And, that's absolutely a process that we can start. I'm in no way saying not to do it. I'm just saying don't do this moratorium. That seems
I agree
ridiculous.
with that. I just wonder if we
So, Tanya, my only concern is this. If we're going to change the parking code, I think we are best off to change the parking code from an unambiguous foundation. So I'm not concerned about changing the parking code. If you have any proposals regarding improving it, I think that's wonderful. I would just like to start from a solid foundation that's not ambiguous.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yep.
I could get it as a discussion item on the next board meeting.
Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yeah, with this new information, it does. I agree that passing a moratorium in an emergency manner makes no sense to do right now, and I don't think that it's a good idea. I agree with Tanya that the parking code is problematic, and we should probably revisit it at some point. But I don't think that we should be revisiting it while there's a moratorium in place for applications, but we continue to process this specific application, which would have tremendous impact on parking in the central business district. So trying to change the code while processing an application that directly addresses parking in the CBD doesn't make sense to me. So I think we should just do nothing rather than pass any temporary moratorium.
Derek. Mayor Pro Tem Baumover.
Sweet. Really glad to hear you all 100% agree in light of new information. Let's not, under any circumstances, pass the moratorium. I think that we get a little more happiness. Was against that. In light of this information, I see no need for that. I would agree with Tanya and Eric that our parking code is extremely problematic. And how it interplays in the central business district is also problematic. So I would like to do nothing as regarding this issue tonight, but I would like to see us tackle this parking code and jump into it. And seeing that this is public and we're all talking about how this is, it would be nice to see this on the next upcoming agenda, essentially. I think it's kind of important, and we're aware of this process going on. If applicants become aware that we're talking about this, they can then make their own choices. But I would really think that this whole incident has demonstrated that the parking code is not clear. After all, we wouldn't be sitting here in an emergency meeting tonight if our parking code was clear. So I think we need to address the parking code, but I do not believe it's the proper thing to do under this emergency moratorium. We can let this continue, and we've all acknowledged that we have some issues with this code, and we'd like to address it publicly, openly in the course of normal business.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, I mean, I think, following up on all of that, everything's been said. This is no longer an emergency situation. The uncertainty has been cleared up. But I would like to, before we decide, take formal action as a board, this is an action item, and this is something we have a lot of people in the audience. So if anyone would like to speak from the public on this, I think you can see the direction the board is going or inclined to go at this point. But we would like to give you a chance to weigh in as well. So if you want to speak, raise your hand, start speaking, turn on your camera. For our call-in users, you'll have to hit *6 to unmute yourself. And anyone who does so can have their 3 minutes of public comment time on this issue. Now, I'm just gonna pause here for a little while, scan to see if I see anything. Oh, Stephanie Andelman. There we go. Just introduce yourself, let us know if you're a town resident or not, and then you'll have your 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Andelman, 198 Frontier, Nederland. And I am following and trying to understand these ordinances. My problem with what I'm hearing and reading is potentially a discrimination of the central business district in their particular application versus it being level setting for all applicants. I do hear that we don't want to do a moratorium, so I am in favor of no moratorium. And it does seem that this is a messy law that needs to be revisited, and that revisitation should take place in the next BOT to go however long it needs to. But as this relates to Ron and his parking lots, those lots have done wonderful things for the community, had advantages for the community. And I speak from the Nederland Farmers Market, and I realize that paid parking makes it more difficult for cars in, out in the market to be there and other special events to be there. But he has donated that space, and I don't want to lose that space. And I know I can work with whatever parking situation is accommodated there. And I just want to call out that he has been wonderful and supportive for these community events that I think will still take place in these spaces, even if parking is approved. And I hope that the parking regulations that are cleaner and implemented allow the events to take place as well as a business owner to make money at their investment. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And Mayor Larson, can I just jump in really quick? This is Jennifer Madsen.
Sure.
This is the meeting tonight relates to the moratorium ordinance and not to the paid parking application by Mr. Mitchell. So any comments or information related to the paid parking application, that should also be presented at any of the hearings related to that application. And I also caution the Board of Trustees not to discuss the paid parking application specifically.
Right, that is a quasi-judicial matter that'll be coming before us at a future meeting, at which point we can take public comment and have our own comments about it. But until then, it's kind of a closed subject.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Stephanie. I see a hand up from Tom Ward. The floor is yours, Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Larson. Tom Ward, not a resident, attorney for Ron Mitchell, and I just want to thank town staff, Attorney Madsen, for their professionalism, their courtesy, and clearly their diligence, the hard work they put into this matter. And that's both personally and on behalf of Ron Mitchell. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else from the public like to weigh in?
And I wanted to, it's Miranda, I wanted to remind the call-in users, yeah, *6.
Hello?
Yes, please.
So I just want to clarify something with the board. When we say,
identify yourself, please.
Oh, sorry, Kathleen Chipai, 30-year East Magnolia resident and 17-year business owner. And I just want to clarify, when we say stick with what we have, are we going to submit the ordinance language on the signed ordinance and stamped ordinance and submit that to the paper, and that's going to be where we stand? Or are we sticking with what Muni Code is saying? I guess I'm confused, and my phone is breaking up, and so I can't hear everything. So can anybody respond to that?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, I believe we've agreed that the Muni Code is the official code,
Correct.
and the job we're up against is to go through the process of codifying that. We may change it later, but for right now, we're saying the Muni Code, which was already published in the Mountaineer, is the official code,
Correct.
and the goal is to make the on-paper code agree with that. We may later change that code, but I think we should start from an unambiguous foundation.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. My public comment is that I don't like that idea at all, because that language, who submitted that language, because that's not what's on the signed ordinance. So that's bothersome to me, because to me, it's the signed ordinance that was voted on. That was the language. Because the language also, in the ordinance that was signed, repeals the parking fund altogether. It deletes it. It says we've deleted this whole section. The parking fund isn't here. Then you have another ordinance after that that somehow revives, because it was never removed from the code. It's bothersome to me. That's all I got to say. That's all.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for your comment. Anyone else like to have public comment? I am not seeing any more as yet. And so we'll bring it back to the board. Further comments from the board based on what we've heard from the public, or we could move forward with what seemed to be the general consensus, which is to reject the ordinance before us, i.e. not put in a moratorium, to direct town staff to put on a future board of trustees agenda a resolution to clean up the language, to codify or to make the Muni Code, as Julian was just saying, make the Muni Code version the official version and clean up the paper trail portion of this parking code, and to place on a near future board agenda a discussion item regarding what the Board of Trustees would like to look at in terms of modifications to the parking code within the town of Nederland.
Could I just make one,
Please.
Have one question for clarification, just for public record, so everyone can hear it. I just want to clarify with Attorney Mattson that the language that was actually voted on in January of 2008 was in fact the language that appears online right now. And that was the intention of the board, but that the ordinance that was signed did not include the board's intentions. Is that correct, Attorney Mattson?
Yes, the minutes from that January 2008 meeting demonstrate that there were amendments to the ordinance that was presented, and those amendments are in line with the published version of the ordinance, and then also what is already existing in Muni Code.
Right. So even though I, on a personal level myself, have maybe some issues with what the board voted on in 2008, I just wanted a chance for the public to hear that the version that is on Municode is the version that that board intended to vote on, and that is what they intended to be the law in Nederland. And so in that sense, I think we should start from there and revise accordingly.
I agree. And also for the record, can we repeat one last time the fact that what was published in the Mountaineer is what kind of sets the law? Can you repeat that for us, Jennifer?
Yeah, yes. So the Colorado case law is that the ordinance that's published in the local newspaper is the language that's in effect for that municipality.
Perfect.
That's weird. What if they did an error on themselves or just wrote something completely fraudulent? You're saying that would be the law, the paper? Doesn't it have to be backed up by some other copy?
So we don't know right now.
Paper could write anything.
Well, so what is
In
sent to the
generalities.
paper, what is sent to the paper is an ordinance that is
What if
sent,
they did
and
a
that's what they
typo or
publish.
Like, I don't know, it just seems weird. I mean, you're the lawyer.
Trustee
I just
Corlin.
think that we are going to talk about this at the next meeting.
Right.
The future code, because there are a lot of discrepancies about this. It doesn't look good to just, not revisit this parking code.
Yeah, that's what
I agree. We can't do a moratorium.
Yeah, that's why I said the 3 steps here we're going to do, and I don't think we will actually need an official motion to reject the ordinance. We simply don't vote on it, and the moratorium doesn't take effect this evening. Correct, Jennifer?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, so we don't need to have a motion to not have a moratorium. We will not have a moratorium unless somebody makes a motion for one. But the second piece would be looking for a nod of 4 from the Board of Trustees to direct town staff to bring forth a resolution to clean up the paper portion of the ordinance 845, to bring the paper portion up. Hold on. Yeah. Hold on. Yeah. To match what was voted on and what was officially published in the Mountaineer, which is the legal ordinance of the town of Nederland. So that would be one nod of 4 we're looking for. And the second nod of 4 would be to direct town staff to put on the I don't want to say next because I haven't looked to see how crowded the next agenda is, and I don't want it to be overly crowded. I want us to have time for the discussion, but one of the next 2 Board of Trustee meetings, a discussion item regarding the parking code in the town of Nederland, and an opportunity for the Board of Trustees and public to weigh in on what changes we might want to have direct the Planning Commission or other boards to look at implementing.
Okay.
So, Tanya, do you agree with both of those? The cleaning up or
I just don't want this to
discussion.
get pushed back into, since we do have at least 3 people that are interested in having a discussion about this. So
agreed. Eric, do you agree with both? Do you nod a 4 on both of those?
I nod a 4 on the 2.
On the 2, okay. Julian?
I'm nodding.
You're nodding. Jonathan?
I'll nod on the 2. I guess I would have liked to see the minutes, and I would have liked to see the actual evidence that I trust town staff, and I have the utmost faith in Jennifer. I just find it helpful in situations like this where I'm put in a position to make decisions that I have all that information in front of me. And it would be nice in future to be able to see those minutes from the meeting in 2008 so that I can read that and I can agree that those minutes do indeed display that was the BOT's intent at that time. And to just wrap this up, I would 100% just say, let's codify it to what's existing on Uniweb. So as Julian said, we have a basis. I am not necessarily, will say 100% convinced that that is actually indeed what happened in 2008. But as folks have said, we need a basis to start from. And I believe the intent of at least 3 folks on this board is to address what we see as poor code and inconsistencies. So I agree with that tonight.
Okay. Lindsay.
Yes, I will nod yes to both.
Okay. And yeah, I think as we can, when we bring back the resolution to codify Muni Code version of Ordinance 845, we can include the minutes from the 2 meetings in 2008 in which this was discussed. We can include that in the packet. So you'll see that as we're sort of adopting or codifying what that board passed and cleaning up the paper. Jennifer, Karen, Miranda, is that clear what we're looking to do in the coming month?
Yes, that's very clear.
Yes.
Very good. Then I believe that can conclude our emergency meeting, our accidental emergency. I want to thank everyone for coming out, particularly, big group of public who came out on a off Tuesday. Thank you guys all. I hope everyone is doing well and is recovering from the events of yesterday. I know that was a big shock to all of us and has really thrown a lot of us for a loop yesterday. And I know that if anyone's having any issues, town has posted some resources online. We have help available, trauma specialists, and also places that if you want to assist the victims or any of the victims, either the police officer or the other 9 or their families, we have resources available for that posted online at the town website and town social media. That said, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Miranda?
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Mayor Larson.
Yes. Meeting is so adjourned at 7:42 p.m. Thank you all. Have a good evening and see you in 2 weeks' time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, folks.
All right.